So everyone, thank you for coming. My name's Tim Doyle. I work over at PlayEven here, and we're here to talk to you guys about the indie mind meld, sort of lessons learned, issues, and trends in mobile gaming. I'm here with Stuart Lewis Smith, CEO of Idle Games, and Michael Alexander, the CCO and co-founder at Blue Shell Games. So these guys are going to be talking with you here today. I'm just going to be asking a couple questions, but we want to keep this really engaging. So honestly, these guys are here for you. If you got a question that you want to ask them, I mean, these guys, great indie game developers making games that are making some money. They're here to help. So feel free to stop me at any time. I'll kind of keep the conversation going, but we'd love for you guys to sort of, come in and ask some questions. They'll take the hard questions. So feel free to ask. So I guess just to start, if you guys wouldn't mind giving us a quick introduction on who you are, your games, and what you guys are doing in the business. Sure.
Hi, my name's Stuart Lewis Smith. I'm the CEO of Idle Games. My background's in the real money online gaming industry. I've worked as VP of product for Serious Poker Network, which is one of the big online poker networks. I was head of product for Party Gaming, Party Poker, which was probably the biggest online gaming brand back in the mid-2000s. I was also the head of online for a big European music and entertainment brand, Ministry of Sound, for 6 years back in the UK. So Idle Games was founded in 2009. The idea behind Idle Games was to create, initially it was to create MMO Facebook games, a platform technology. In the middle of 2011 was when I was introduced to the company to really try and transition the company from that MMO Facebook web strategy to social casino. So we started to work on Fresh Deck Poker, which is our kind of flagship application. And Fresh Deck Poker is now available on iOS, Android, Kindle, Facebook. And our strategy moving forward is very much in the social casino game space.
Michael Alexander, I'm the Chief Creative Officer for Blue Shell Games and co-founder. My background is in game design. I've worked in MMO console for over 12 years, and I've been working in San Francisco in startup land for about 5 years of that. Previous to co-founding Blue Shell Games, I was the lead game designer at Slide, which was purchased by Google in 2010. We started Blue Shell Games coming out of the Slide Google transition and have been around since the summer of 2010. We started building social games and applications in 2010, and our premier product right now is also in the social casino space, Lucky Slots for Facebook, Android, and iOS. And we've also made a number of other applications in that space that we're kind of trying to boot up off of that.
So we do have two top casino game making guys in here at the moment, so it could be some chairs flying, could get pretty heated. Not going to make any guarantees, but we'll see what happens. So I guess let's start a little bit with the basics, right? I mean, what's kind of the biggest thing out here for people in terms of, I'm an indie game developer. Probably one of the most difficult things is how do I get my game out there? How do I get eyeballs in front of it? Where do I start? So coming from that perspective of the indie game developer, where do you start for how do I get some users? How do I get some people initially looking at my game and maybe telling their friends about it?
I would say that the single biggest challenge you're going to face is user acquisition in this business, bar none. It's extremely expensive, it's extremely competitive, and you need to be extremely intelligent about it. There are lots of challenges that you're going to face with user acquisition. I would say the first thing that you really need to understand are your game metrics and KPIs. Don't think that if you build something great, people will come. They won't. You'll build something great, you'll put it out, nobody's going to come. I can assure you that. You need to be really intelligent about your user acquisition strategy, and before you really start throwing money at your game, you're going to want to make sure that the in-game metrics are all exactly where you need them to be. So things like retention, day 1 retention, day 7 retention, day 30 retention. If those things aren't in place before you really start spending money, you're going to be chucking your money down the drain. Monetization, virality. You need to make sure that when you spend $1 on a user, that you get some free users out of that. So virality in the game is essential. You're probably not going to be able to compete on a purely CPI user acquisition basis unless you have those things in place.
Certainly, and to Stuart's point, gathering those sorts of metrics, you'll find anybody that's in this industry that's launching a game will certainly get out in marketplaces that are less expensive to test their user base way before you go US or try to start acquiring US. So you'll find traditionally people have launched very small campaigns in Canada. Canada's kind of saturated at the moment. The launch in Ireland or New Zealand was one that you were mentioning previously, which you can get a lot less expensive users, but these users will model very similarly to US users. But the acquisition to be able to test these metrics and make sure your game does have some stickiness, to make sure that the retention's there, whether you're testing monetization, whether you're testing, and this is very important, especially for iOS and Google Play, is ASO, your application search. It's the same way as, if you're building a website and you're trying to optimize for SEO, that plays in all of the stores. You're going to want to test keywords, your copy, what's at the top. Those things are going to attract your users. You're going to try to test titles, all sorts of things. So there's definitely an iterative process way before you think of fully launching your game that you're going to want to go through and just continuing to test and test. There are ways also using a number of companies that you can acquire users that are less expensive, but will be able to test maybe that won't monetize well, but you'll be able to test game performance and other things as well using like incentivized traffic, etc.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Back to your point, you guys mentioned, talking about SEO. How do I get users into my game kind of organically, searching through the App Store? I think that's the thing. I work with a lot of different game developers of all different sizes, and certainly one thing that a lot of people sort of miss is that point exactly. So do you have any kind of like ninja tips on how do I get my keywords up there? How do I get to be, in the top 10 search results when I'm looking for a football game or a casino game or something like that?
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to look to see where your game is positioned in the rest of the competitive market. You're going to want to see like test searching for those sorts of things that you mentioned. Like if you're making a football game, see what the top hits are. See what other keywords pop up when you're searching for it. See like what other people are putting in their description and copy. You'll see patterns as you assess your vertical in the marketplace. You're going to know that there are certain things that they're doing, and you're going to want to copy a number of those things and try something different to set yourself apart. There's a number of services as well that allow you to just take a look at your top competitors or people that you're doing. SEO Man is one, Mobile Dev HQ is another, that allow you to see kind of what the top search results are, give you suggested keywords, and give you a basis to start optimizing that from.
Yeah, I think nobody really knows exactly how the algorithms work on. It's kind of like regular web SEO. There are lots of factors at play. I think certainly one factor that will help you is success. So lots of installs and lots of revenue. But given that you guys are probably looking at launching a new app, starting from a zero baseline, that's not really going to help you from the launch. So. I'd advise looking at other apps in your category to see how they name the app titles, look at the kind of keywords, the meta tags that they're using within the App Store page. That's a good place to start. There's certainly some best practices out there that you can find.
And we test on a number of fronts. As a matter of fact, our UA guy is sitting in the back here, who runs a lot of the testing on icons. We test icons. We test titling. We test what is the first few lines that you see in the description, because that if you can't catch them in that first second, then it's over. We test screenshots. We treat screenshots mostly as like marketing material. You'll see that they actually read like advertising across. Catch them on the first image, and if they're still interested, then you can start pulling them in on the subsequent images, etc. There is no analytics for Apple. So definitely we will try things in a serial manner. So we will, every time we're doing a release, we're trying something new and seeing if there is any change in, say, click to install, so our conversion rate. We'll also do smaller tests on the web or in minor advertising campaigns, where we'll test those sorts of images on a $10 ad spend and see if they perform better one against the other. It's a very cheap way of actually just doing iterative testing.
Yeah, just on that point, actually, when we first launched Fresh Deck Poker on mobile, we were already launched on Facebook, I think, for about 3 months prior to that. So we were running marketplace ads on Facebook for the Facebook Canvas application, testing various mobile icon creatives, and I think that was like a 2-month iterative process, and you can get lots and lots of data on click-through rates for different app icon creatives, and we used that actually as the basis to decide on which app icon to go for. And there's a real science behind like app icons. You can look at any particular genre, look at any casino slots game, and everyone's got 777 in their icon. The color of your board, all of this kind of stuff's important. Whether you've got eyes, human kind of looking out, all these kind of things. Cards important, certainly in our genre. So I'd look at reference from other apps. Don't think that being creative there is going to be a successful strategy necessarily. There are proven methods.
Yeah, and to that point, if you are doing iterative testing on any of these sorts of images, Facebook is a really good advertising platform to start testing those sorts of things off of. Even a $10 a day spend can get you a lot of data. You don't really have to throw down a lot of money to do these sorts of testing, and you can get a long distance from that, for sure. Yes? I'm sorry? Yeah, so you would basically run multiple campaigns, one against the other, and see what the click-through rate is, and then... Unfortunately, the way that Facebook optimizes their ads, they will only fill the better one, what they think is the better one. You'll want to run multiple campaigns against each other. Yes?
This might be a moving question about the A/B testing, but when your app or game isn't done yet, you put ads on Facebook or Google to A/B test. Where do those lead to?
They can go nowhere. We actually, like Stuart, like Idle, we actually have a Facebook application as well, so we do test against our Facebook application. But you could do something where you could just pick up registration and get early interest. You could do a survey, like you could link to a survey and say, hey, what would you like to see in this type of application? So you don't need to necessarily drop those users off a cliff. You could certainly do interesting things that would further test application and things on that order. No.
Question?
Sure.
Anyone else have questions?
Yeah, so we'll try and use the mics because we're trying to record the session, so I'll just pass this through.
I arrived a little late, so hopefully you didn't touch on this, but in terms of identifying the right categories for a new game app that you're submitting to either store, do you have recommendations? For example, puzzle games do well, but they're also highly competitive, where trivia is not as competitive. So just curious, because I know in Apple you can pick a 1 and a 2, how you recommend picking the right categories.
Certainly. So if you're just starting something new, you really haven't picked what direction you want to go. Definitely, if I was to do it today and we weren't following casino or anything in that order, I would start looking. I would go down top grossing. I would look at what are the patterns, the styles, the genres right now that are able to do revenue. I would analyze those competitors, see how their monetization hooks are working, like why are people paying in these applications. And then I would see, are there certain verticals, are there certain genres that aren't as crowded as others, and I would also look at, what is build cost, build time to replicate some of these successful items. Like right now, I wouldn't want to tackle poker, and I'm glad you guys did, but because it's a huge build time in order to get an application out there. We're working in the slots vertical right now. Time to market is a lot smaller for slots versus poker, especially because of the online synchronous component thereof. So I would make those sorts of assessments as well.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, we're a social casino focused company, so all of our apps are, we're pretty limited in the choice of categories that we can be in. So it's either card games, casino. But yeah, I mean, you want to really look at what it takes to get position in those categories. I mean, certainly in casino, it's probably one of the most competitive categories out there. To really get ranking in those categories is going to cost you a lot of money. You're up against companies spending, well into the millions of dollars a month on user acquisition. So, to try and get good ranking in those categories is going to be expensive. You can obviously employ, bursting campaigns to try and get yourself up into the download install rankings in those categories, but really, in top grossing or any of those other categories, it's going to be really challenging to compete in those genres, I'd say.
Is it not also true though? I think your guys are coming from that sort of gambling kind of
Yep.
perspective anyway, and I think with traditional games or sort of other types of games, the passion I think is part of that process as well. I think you're absolutely right. And a lot of the studios I consult with or talk to fail to think about the pragmatic, systematic approaches to these things. But equally, there are other people who come into studios and they don't have a passion for the thing they're trying to make. So I'm going to try and, trying to put my moderator head on, to track back at you. Is there room for passion in the type of game, in the sort of gaming market rather than the games market?
Yeah,
There's a story.
absolutely. I mean, when we looked at this sector in general, this genre, our sort of analysis of poker before we started was, we've got a bunch of very passionate people. We've got a team of people that are really capable, and the bar that's set out there is particularly low. We decided that there was really space for somebody to come in with really high production values and produce something of extremely high quality, and that's really what the mantra of Idle Games is really high production quality, high production value. Yes, we produced a very complex game. Poker is not a simple application to build. Very long development time. It requires a big team of people. But we wanted to do something correctly. So the underlying infrastructure that we built, the application was built to fully compliant real money gaming standards, and that's something that nobody's really done in the social space. Additionally, the creative, I don't know if you're familiar with our game Fresh Tech Poker, but the art quality in production, animation is something that really sort of it's second to none. So I think, yeah, absolutely, there's you need to be passionate and really believe in what you're doing. And I think certainly now, I'd say this sort of concept of MVP, people talk about minimum viable product, what do you need to do to get a product out to market? I'm not sure that really applies anymore. I think the people who are really competing, it's more about maximum viable product. What can you do that's really, you're effectively competing in a commodity market. Lots of people are doing exactly what you're doing. How are you going to distinguish yourself? And that's really going to come down to quality, innovation.
I believe absolutely there's room for passion. Like no matter what genre you're trying to tackle, whether it be trivia, whether it be simulation, if you want to build, a spacefaring game, that you think is that you're very passionate about and is something that you want to see get to market, there's absolutely room to do that. What you need to be aware of is what is the environment, the business environment in which you're launching this. How are you positioning this? How long is it going to take to go to market? What is your distribution plan? All of these things need to back up that passion and for the particular product that you're trying to make as well.
So I guess I think that segues into a good point here. So you have your passion, you're making a great game, but really, how do you kind of bridge the gap between, look, I've got a great game here, but how do I turn that game into a business? How do I start making money off that game? Because I see a lot of great games all the time. There's tons of great games out there, but are they profitable? Most of the time, not really. But you guys that have made games that are both awesome and profitable, how do you really bridge that gap?
So, I mean, the coming down to the fundamentals, you're going to have to buy users cheaper than their LTV. I mean, and all of those things that I mentioned earlier on are going to be factors at play. So making sure your KPIs are correct and in place and competitive before you start spending on user acquisition. You need good retention, you need good monetization, you need good virality in the game. Anything that brings your effective CPI, so your CPI is what you're spending on per user basis, but your effective CPI is includes all of the organics that you might get through bursting or through virality in the game. to bring down your ECPI costs is crucial, and maximizing your LTV, which is effectively a factor of retention and revenue. So that's kind of fundamentals. I would focus on getting all that right early on. And there are lots of monetization strategies that you can apply, whether that's we're fundamentally in-app purchase driven, but we're also now carrying advertising in certain positions, which is really starting to pay off as well. So I think there are some key things you need to get right before you're going to start getting results.
So no matter what sort of game you're making, you'll see that most people have moved to a free model, not a paid download model. As a matter of fact, a lot of the advertising methodologies, I wouldn't even know how to start approaching a user acquisition strategy that wasn't on a freemium model, simply because the friction is just so high on a number of these games. 90+% of the iOS store is now on the free model. No matter what you're building, though, I would take a look at, again, competitive products. If you're building a level-based game, people are putting in, a switch to pay for the rest of the levels. You can, you must know that 90+% of people that do download your game will not pay. So there's also strategies for how to make money off of people that won't pay. As a matter of fact, Playhaven is a good example of sending users to other genres that they might be interested in paying if they're not interested in paying in the particular game or genre that you're in now, and trading installs in that fashion. But I would just say look at the different strategies that are out there. You'll see in Fresh Deck Poker, there's a way of sending users on to other applications, showing advertising, other ways of monetizing. Even if you don't actually have a freemium hook within your game, you can still make money within your application, to be sure. But for freemium payments, there is a lot of best practices out there. It's probably one of the things that we study the most is price points, is like where should that friction point be in terms of trying to convert users. That's a funnel that we've been optimizing for the last 3 years since we've been in business, and it's something that we'll be optimizing until the cows come home. So,
yeah, just a point on optimization. So your analytics tools are going to be crucial to the operation of your business. It basically all comes down to analytics. Your ability to understand what your users are doing within the application and identifying particular groups of players and defining them by their behavior, their demographic, or whatever, and then really customizing the experience for those guys differently. There's we treat people who spend money very differently to people who don't spend money at the most basic level. Geographically, we have different pricing in place for different players. If you have spent money but haven't spent money for a long time, we might treat you slightly differently, give you a different experience. We give first users, the first time they come in, a very different experience to regular users. So all of these things are kind of standard practice, but you really need to understand your data, and there are lots of tools that you can have in place, but whether they're third-party tools that probably, I think there's free tools out there that you can use for doing that. Maybe they're not as comprehensive as you're really going to need, but there's certainly a lot of tools you can choose from for business analytics, and you really need to understand that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for people that are just starting out, most of these analytics packages do have an indie level or a starter level where you can get a good number of users before you even hit a pay point, Flurry, Mixpanel, and a number of others. So definitely make that a priority. Know what your users are doing and know how you can adjust and what adjustments do, of how that affects your product.
In addition to analytics tools, are you familiar with any in-app purchasing tools?
In terms of like third-party tool sets that plug straight in?
Right. So instead of having to build those ourselves.
Sure. For the most part, both iOS IAP and Google Play purchasing is rather straightforward on how to connect those up. There really isn't a need to make that kind of like middle layer leap between the two, and it's really going to be highly custom to where you're putting in these monetization points, like when you're asking the player to monetize. That really, I don't think a third-party tool would be best suited for this case. Yes.
Hi. I was wondering if you could expand on the size of your team and how it's evolved from the beginning till now as an indie.
Sure. So our team started off as 4 guys in the summer of 2010. We remained 4 guys for approximately 9 months. And we really tried to iterate and get something out the door fairly quickly, start getting numbers, start getting a revenue stream. We're a bootstrap company. We're a company that has never taken any funding. So for us, it was very important to get a product to market, get it tested, get it out there. At that point, we actually started generating a bit of revenue, which allowed us to, in early 2011, hire 2 employees, 2 engineer employees. Through 2011, we added a few contractors, art contractors at the same time. Contracting gives you flexibility to kind of ride the wave if things don't go as expected, to be sure. And it wasn't until early 2012 when we spent maybe 4 or 5 months after we launched Lucky Slots really tuning, really to what Stuart's pointing to, which is, getting our retention right, getting our virality right, making sure the monetization works, even before we started really pressing users into the application. So it was 2012 for us that things really started taking off once we had thought we had really nailed down those funnels and really nailed the KPIs down. So we entered 2012 with 9 employees and exited with 19. Right now we're 31. I'm sorry? The initial 4 is split into 2 product folks and 2 engineers, a client engineer and a back-end engineer. And then product side, we both have PM ship abilities, although my background is game design.
So question on the
Yeah.
Yeah, so our story is slightly different. I think I explained at the beginning that the strategy of the company when it was founded is very different. We have taken investment. We've got one of the most prolific investors in the Bay Area, Rick Thompson, as our angel investor. He's the guy who founded Playdom, Funzio. We started slightly differently. There was a team of 2 studios effectively. We had the original MMO studio. I started the second studio for Social Casino. The first people we were brought on were product guys to start getting the specifications together. We started hiring engineers very shortly after that. Couple of server guys, a couple of client-side guys. That engineering team's about 15 people now. Marketing guys, BI analysts, more product guys. So we're about 25 people now.
So question about the optimizing analytics.
Yeah.
What would be a minimum number of players before we can, in a ballpark, before you can accurately say that, well, we got a pretty mass of players?
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, I guess. So there's lots of ways you can do testing. We actually built out our own multivariate testing framework, which allow us to test more than just A/B testing. We can test multiple iterations simultaneously. I guess it all comes down to statistical significance. You can have hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users, but you really need to, it's a statistical problem you need to look at, and statistical significance comes into play at the point when you can determine that your results are statistically significant. Then you can start making decisions. I would say, however, that just be cautious when you're testing, because one thing that we did, and I think this might not apply if you're all kind of mobile developers, but when we launched on Facebook, one of the strategies is to sort of test your game. You go out and acquire very cheap users in Indonesia, some of the cheaper markets. You can get a lot of volume very quickly, really, to effectively test that your game doesn't break. But I wouldn't really use that as the basis for some decision making in the game design, because those users aren't going to monetize virality and all of the sort of interactions that happen within the game using that method are probably not going to be the same behavior that you're going to see when you ultimately launch in the sort of tier 1 markets. So just be cautious with that. But I would say, if you can build in the ability to at least A/B test, you can really start making some smart decisions about game design. And we don't launch any features at all within the game without A/B testing them. At least A/B testing them, if not completely multivariate testing.
Yeah, again, it really is about what you're testing. If you're testing whether your game will crash, pushing a couple hundred users through it, definitely. Like, it's similar to what Stuart was talking about, using cheap acquisition to test, just functionality, just make sure everything works is one thing. We kind of use the rule, again, it's statistically significant for the event. So if you're looking at, how do people convert, you might need only 1,000 users to figure out how many installs you can get on a particular ad type or something like that. If you're trying to figure out, are these users going to stick around 7 days later? Again, it's probably on that order. If you're trying to figure out if people pay, now that's a harder one, because really you're trying to, 1,000 people, you're expecting most freemium style games will get around 3% conversion, depending most of these. So 3% on 1,000 is 30. That's not a statistically significant number. So that's something that's going to have to be tested either across a longer period of time by getting more and more installs, or a wider bandwidth, 10,000 users or something on that order. You can certainly start getting signals, like if you're expecting 30 and you get 2, something's wrong right off, but you're not going to get great, granular information at that point.
I just wanted to make another point on testing. So, obviously A/B testing is the right way to do it. I think you'll find a lot of people sort of doing serial testing. So, you're going to be very iterative in the early stages, making a lot of changes in your application, and you might change multiple things in one particular build. And there are lots of things that can change the KPIs in your game. You're going to put a build out. Things might change, things might not change, but trying to identify what it is that you changed that had an impact is something that's actually very difficult, especially as you get more sophisticated. There are much more variables at play. So, for example, if you're already buying users and you're doing user acquisition, you put a new build out, maybe you've changed your app page, maybe you've changed a number of features in the game, maybe you support that with a campaign over the weekend, for example. Or was it because it's a weekend that your users performed better? Was it because you changed your user acquisition source? Was it because you made changes in the game? And, retention might go up, revenue might go down, and it's really, really, well, I'd say impossible to determine what it was that made those changes. So really A/B testing is the only way you can make informed decisions on that stuff.
Serial testing, like, for people that don't have the bandwidth to do large amount of A/B testing, serial testing can work if you're changing one thing at a time. You're changing one thing, test it. Do things move? Change one thing, do things move? It's possible. It's slower. For smaller team sizes, that is certainly something that you might want to look at to be sure. And I'd say on the user acquisition front, for folks that are just starting off or just trying to launch, getting in front of blogs and reviewers is also a very, very good way of just getting some initial traction. If you're testing, say, functional testing, or if you're still trying to dial in the application's KPIs, maybe not the best time to send it to review. But definitely, if you're wanting to get that ball rolling, it is something that we did initially when we had launched. I know that you guys had gotten a decent amount of press when FreshDeck first got out as well, which helped you guys get the ball rolling. So definitely look at that as something as well.
Yeah, there's a good point there, actually. So just talking about user acquisition, one recommendation I would make is that you establish relationships with the platforms directly. If you've got a good relationship with Google, Android guys, or Facebook platform team, you can get a lot of traction from their support. So if you can get your game featured, that's a pretty significant event. So you should be trying to establish relationships with these teams prior to launching a game.
And that's not only just possible for a studio. It's definitely possible for indie. Apple and Google are always looking for new indie titles to feature that they actually want to promote and show off like good material. So absolutely, that's great. I mean, you guys are being featured in Kindle right now.
Yeah, we're all over Kindle at the moment. So we just launched a week ago, 2 weeks ago, and yeah, we're featured on Kindle at the moment. So if you've got a Kindle device and you go to the App Store, you're going to see Fresh Tech Poker all over it.
And we're going into Kindle featured next week. So that's definitely a relationship that was established through Amazon, and definitely something that you guys should look at.
Hi. Touching on the distribution of users across different platforms, different demographics, and things like relationships with the platforms themselves, how important is it to have, say, variance between the product, like across platforms? For example, Android might have design paradigms that Apple doesn't like, or vice versa.
It hasn't been the case for us that we had anything that was particularly feature-based that was different between the two. There's definitely going to be differences in the in-app purchase flows. Apple is just so much easier than Google Play is to deal with, and Amazon is quite easy as well, since they do store payment information and things on that order. But there isn't a lot of proscription from Apple that's all that different from Google, that's all that different from Amazon. You might find things like, different rating systems. So if you had alcohol in your game, you're certainly going to be rated a little bit differently in different applications. You'll find different markets, like we actually can't be in Korea right now because there is no simulated gambling, but that's more going to be regional but not definitely platform. I haven't seen anything. Have you seen anything?
Not really. I mean, we have basically the same application on all three devices, Android, Kindle, and iOS. There are certain things that are handled differently. I mean, in-app purchase is a different integration. Push notifications, which are a crucial component of your application for retention. If you're building a game and you haven't put push notifications or local notifications in, that's something you guys need to address. But they're handled differently on Android and Apple. You've got a lot more flexibility on the Android platform than you do on Apple. With that, I think you can do like rich push notifications now on Android.
And then we treat the platform slightly differently. We actually will test a good bit more on Android, because we can drop the release any given time, and we do a level of serial testing as well to see, does this work, which is possible on Facebook and Android for us, impossible on iOS given the fact that there is a review period and things on that. So we do treat it slightly differently, but for the most part, we are shooting for parity. We want the user to experience the application very similar across all platforms, so we actually strive to keep things in line.
I have a question for you, Stuart. Could you tell us the story of? Could you tell us the story of Fresh Tech Poker acquisition? How much did it cost, and how did it work for you? Did you use several campaigns to have this acquisition?
Yeah, so I mean, we had the benefit of being a completely cross-platform application. It's a single player base across all devices. So the Facebook players are playing against the Android players and the iOS players all together on the same tables. So when we launched, one sort of key thing about a poker network is that you need critical liquidity in the game. So we kind of grew the player base initially on Facebook when user acquisition was a lot cheaper. We actually coincided our launch on iOS with the launch of Facebook's mobile ads, which was back in January. So, I mean, unfortunately, those days are gone. But when we launched on iOS, I think installs we were getting for like 30 cents or something like that on casino genre mobile ads. Now you're going to be paying 10 times that at least, probably. So we kind of grew it organically. And another sort of word of caution is that in a game like poker, and it's probably the same for slots, where you've got extremely long tail in the user's lifetime. when you're spending, $2 on a user acquisition, it may be 2 or 3 months before you recoup that investment in terms of the ROI on that player, and we look at lifetimes, in excess of the life that our players have actually been in our game yet. So we project that a very long tail. But you have to bear in mind there's also cash flow constraints that you're working to as well. It might take you, like I said, 2-3 months to recoup that. Apple's payment terms are going to be 45 days, so there's another 2 months before you actually get paid on that. So you spend a couple of dollars now, it's going to be 5 or 6 months before you get that back. Yeah, you need capital, and you need to sort of spend that organically. Well, we spend. I guess we spend sort of fairly aggressively. I don't want to talk about exactly what our budgets are, but in many hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. Yeah.
But it also goes to what sort of team size are you supporting as well, right? So if you're a one-man shop, supporting a single developer, that's going to be a lot less that you're trying to look at on monthly outlay for acquisition and monthly income as well. So that can operate at any scale, to be sure.
So you mentioned being present on different like iTunes and also the Google Play Store.
Mm-hmm.
What did you guys start out doing native apps for each, or did you guys start using a cross-platform engine, and has that strategy changed?
That is an endless debate. So for our Lucky Slots product, we are native on both iOS and Android. We have looked at a number of other products cross-platform as well. Matter of fact, we're actually porting a new product of ours. We're using Air. So we're going to go cross-platform in Air. For us, it was a decision about quick build time because we are taking a Facebook like Flash application that was designed to go to Air and go to multiple platforms. The other options that we've seen people use are develop on iOS and use a porting structure like App Portable to go onto Android. I know that you guys had the same debate and decided to go native. There's performance considerations. If you're making a 3D shooter, you're not going to go with a cross-platform solution, most likely, unless you're going with Unity. It really goes to the genre. It really goes to like what you're comfortable operating in as well. There's many considerations.
Of course, other platforms like Marmalade and various others are available.
That's absolutely right. Yeah, Corona SDK. The list goes on and on. It really goes to what is your team comfortable with using? What sort of languages, are you trying to launch simultaneously? Or are you doing, looking at maybe Android 6 months, a year down the line? Maybe it's not so important to invest in cross-platform immediately. Are you trying to simul-launch? Are you going Android first? There are just many different considerations, I'd say.
Yeah, no, I don't want to repeat what Michael just said, but yeah, Fresh Take Poker is, we actually use Lua and Cocos 2D for the client-side technology, which is highly performant, which is one of the requirements that we had. So it's a single technology across both iOS and Android. And the new games that we're developing, we're actually looking at Adobe Air. For the same reasons that Michael said, we have very capable Flash, a very capable Flash team, and it gives them a lot more flexibility, more rapid development. Yeah.
So I was going to ask a question in the sort of traditional game space in particular. We've seen there's always been a need to go cross-platform just to get the reach out to a larger audience. But over the last sort of few months or so, I've seen a lot of developers starting to say they're seeing more and more players starting to use multiple devices themselves, which historically didn't happen.
Yeah.
Are you guys seeing the same thing? Are more people using more devices?
Absolutely, actually. As I said many times, we're completely cross-platform, so we're on all devices. It's a single account that players use, so they can literally in Fresh Take Poker, we're the only poker game that allows you to do this, but you can pick up the same hand without ever leaving your seat at a table and port from device to device. So you could be playing online on Facebook at a table, playing a hand of poker in a tournament, and you can log in on your mobile phone log in, and you'll pick up the same hand at the same table without losing your seat. You can carry on, go home, get back online, on your iPad and pick up the same game.
Have you always seen people use that, or is that new that you see people?
We see a lot of cross-platform use actually, and we really kind of leverage that to the maximum extent possible. So part of our strategy is pushing people from device to device. We find our most valuable cohorts of players are those players that play on multiple devices, and they are multiple times more valuable than just the single device Facebook player or the single device mobile player. If the guy is a Facebook logged in web and mobile player, and hopefully other devices, iPad and mobile and web, these guys are worth multiple X, and retention is incomparable. So.
Yeah, we operate in the same fashion. We're on Facebook, iOS. We have both an iPhone version and a HD, tablet version for iPad, and on Android. And yeah, to Suit's point, we are seeing a lot more people. They'll play, on the bus to work on their phone, and then when they get to the office, they'll play on Facebook, and then when they're sitting in front of the TV at home at night, they'll play an iPad, and we can see these behavior patterns and multiple device play actually grow over time. And to Stuart's point, every time we add somebody to a different platform, whether it be iPad, iPhone, Android, and Facebook, basically their value doubles every time they add a device.
Well, everyone, I think we're out of time for now, but thank you so much for all the questions. I hope you guys were able to learn a lot. Let's give these guys a round of applause for being up here. I think we'll be sticking around for a tiny bit afterwards, so if anyone wants to come and grab us, feel free. But for the most part, thanks again for coming out. And that's it, yeah.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
And I'd like to add my thanks to Tim, Stuart, and Michael for coming. Please stay with us. We have more going on in this room. We'll be talking a lot more about indie.